get me out the dark. Finally, I can see you crystal clear.
Hey, welcome back to the Ocean Athlete. We're out on location in secret location, Temple Bay in Noosa. Temple Bay is the secret location that we always say that it is when we don't want people to know. So we're down here with Danny from CrossFit Noosa. We've come out on location just to do some things, to show you some stuff in regards to the hips. Sticking with the hip theme this week again. Stuff that you can do in your warm-ups prior to your training and even during your training and different things. Then we're going to get out and show you some stuff on the water, try some tricky stuff and see if we can start really explaining this technique and why we're spending so much time in the hip and hamstring area. So yeah, Danny's going to show us some extend on what we worked on last week.
Do what we call good mornings, hip extension exercise where I'll give you a refresher anyway. Wrap your feet into the band on the back of the head, and from a standing position we're talking about movement that occurs only at the hips. So I'm pushing my hips back, my butt back as far this way as I can, almost to the point where my toes are overbalancing. I'm going into a fully stretched hamstring position, tiny bend of the knee, and then I'm extending my hips powerfully forward. So I'm working my hips back, big stretch, pause for a second, and then power my hips through. I didn't really give any guidance on what to do, how many to do, any of that kind of stuff. If you need to put a number on any of this stuff, it's generally going to be 1 or 2 sets, and something along those lines, something good morning-y. It's not going to be a massive strength builder more than it is a hip activation movement. It's going to get your hips working so that when you get out onto the water and you start pulling yourself forward, extending your hips into the paddle, it's just going to be ready. It's going to be a primed movement essentially. So that was our good morning. So I'm thinking somewhere in the region of 15 to 30 reps until your hips start to work, until your hips start to burn. Now, the other thing I'm going to show you guys is another band movement, and this is to build on what Woogie has as his base for any kind of stand-up, which is this kind of wishbone position, which is reasonably narrow, an external rotation, butt tipped back slightly, so pelvis tilted back slightly, weight sort of 60-40, 60 towards the outside edge of the foot, 40 on the inside, so you're creating a large surface area. The stuff that's working the hardest in that position to keep you locked in external rotation and to assist you in that hip extension movement as you pull yourself into the paddle is a muscle up on the side here, glute med, and it works, gluteus medius, and it works primarily to externally rotate your femur out your thigh. And a great way to work that and a great way to get that thing activated using the band is, we call them X-band walks, and it's a similar sort of setup to the good morning. I'm going to, I'll put my feet in. I'm going to be reasonably wide, so sort of outside, slightly outside shoulder width apart. And I don't need to do a lot of this stuff. I think your hips will pretty much tell you when you're done. It doesn't take long to make this burn at all. Band should be reasonably far back towards my ankle, so back in the arch of the foot. I'm going to create an X in the band just by rolling it over. Put my hands through, and I create more tension by bringing my hands up to chest, less tension obviously by taking my hands away to the floor. So I'm going to walk from here, and I'm going to press out. I'm going to walk towards my right hand side. I'm going to press out as far as I can, and then walk back in. Press out as far as I can, and then walk back in. And I'm creating tension as I push. I'm creating tension as I come back in. I'm not just kind of trumping around the place. So I'm trying to squeeze out and then lift and squeeze in. Squeeze out and then lift and squeeze in. And if you take this thing for a walk for maybe, I don't know, let's say 10 meters one way, and then come on back to where you started, this high hip area, this outside hip is just going to be screaming, and it's just going to be ready to do work. And it's a great method of just strengthening those smaller supporting muscles. Okay, cool. So I'm going to give you guys as well, so what have I left you with? Yeah, 10 meters forwards, backwards, that's going to be enough, I guarantee it. If you need more, please feel free to play with that. I'm going to give you guys a quick warm-up drill that you can do anytime you're about to throw out on the board. And this can be stand-up, this can be shortboard surfing, pretty much anything where you're going to be using your hips and you need to be mobile and active. This is a great little warm-up drill you can do. So I'm going to go down on one knee, like in a lunge position, top of my foot resting on the floor. I'm going to press my hip forward, so it's immediately putting stretch on here. Interlace my fingers, stretch up over my head, and I'm trying to create an open shoulder angle. I'm not trying to arch my back just to get to range. So I'm stretching shoulders out, I'm stretching hip out. From there, I'm going to go hands to the floor on the inside of my foot. If I can, I'm going to take my elbow down to the ground, and I'm going to come back, both hands on the floor. Sit back onto my heel, so that gives me a good hamstring stretch. I'll grab the outside edge of my foot. This stays stable. I turn in, I turn out, come back to the front.
You shake anything about?
Elbow touches down. Yeah, this bit right now. Yeah. Touch your elbow down, come back to the start, stretch out. So I'm going to flow through one reasonably quickly. It goes up, stretch, hands down, elbow down, sit back, grab your foot, roll in, twist it out, come up to the front, touch your elbow down, stretch up, swap sides, and I just kind of do it front on. Stretch up, hands go on the inside, elbow goes down to the floor, sit back onto your heel, grab the outside of your foot, twist it in, twist it out, come back to the front, touch, stretch up, hip stretch. I'm going to go 3 aside, then I'm going to sit myself out, feet nice and wide, and sit one toe facing straight up. This knee is going to be externally rotated out as I sit my butt down towards the floor. So hands are going to come into play for a start. I'm going to put my hands down, just balance myself out, trying to get my hips as low as I can and my chest up. I'm going to walk myself over to the other side. You'll see my heel is down, my knee is out. I use my hands to manipulate that position. So this is an error. This is an error. I'm trying to work myself across to that side and then work myself across to this side. And when you get confident, you take your hands away and just stick them out in front of you. Keep your hips nice and low and just move across from side to side. And I'm thinking if you can punch out maybe 10 aside, you're going to be feeling pretty flexible, pretty mobile and ready to go. That's all from me.
So just one thing with that sort of stuff, when you're doing this sort of stuff, is take your time, do it properly. One of the biggest mistakes that I see, and I'm sure Danny's seen it before, is you get people that are coming and they'll rush through this portion of it. A lot of people, come to us and go, I've got this trouble, I've got that trouble, or the hips, shoulders, and different things. When we prescribe something, take your time doing it. If you're going to do something, do it well, do it properly. This is part of your training session. You're doing it, it's an hour and a half training session, and this takes up 20 minutes of it. That means you've got an hour and 10 out on the water. So spend the time doing these sorts of things, and it comes back to quality of training, not quantity. We see a lot of people going out going, oh, I paddled for 2.5 hours today, or I did this and that, but I've got a really sore hip because I didn't spend the time at the start or at the end doing the mobility stuff. The reason we're trying to bring this stuff to you is so we can start eliminating a lot of the injuries that are coming up because of poor technique and people just not strengthening different areas or spending the time doing preventative measures like this sort of stuff. This is part of your training, so spend the time and do it right. Hey, so we're just going to do some stuff on the water. So we've been trying to talk about the technique side of it, and with the hip extension, the one thing I do want to get clear is certainly we don't want to see, we look like we're probably overdoing the things where we're moving that movement forward. We're not saying you get out on the water and all of a sudden we've got all these people paddling around like this doing this massive hip extension, so that's going to cause other troubles somewhere else, and everyone already hates us. So paddling around looking like we're trying to hump a chicken, they're going to hate us more. So what we're trying to talk about is getting that lock there, locking in the hamstrings, the glutes, and extending the hips forward, or locking in the core so we get that movement forward, so we don't get this thing that we see a lot of now where we lock in the paddle and we start dropping back. I'm sort of spending a bit of time talking with Danny about it. We're going to throw I'm going to throw a theory out there about that. I think a lot of the stuff where people are dropping down is because there's a weakness in the glutes, there's a weakness in the hamstrings. When we're dropping down like that, that's not the hamstring contracting, that's the hamstring stretching, so the muscle's doing nothing. So if we're thinking about locking that hamstring in, nice and tight, locking those glutes in, obviously not doing that sort of a movement, but locking that whole core area in, you know, from your knees to below your nipples, that's your core, not the little muscles in front. Your core's from here all the way up. So locking those portions in nice and tight. There may be some small movement at the start as we start building strength to lock in, and there may be that small kink where it locks, and then the movement will start moving forward. So we want to start trying to, you know, go to your gyms and your trainers and different things and say, hey, these are the types of things that I want to build strength in my glutes, which are those X-band walks and those different types of things. We'll start talking with Danny about different areas on how to strengthen hamstring strength and different things like that. So I won't throw anything out there because he's the expert. So we're just going to jump on the water. So I mean, those different types of things, when you do your hip mobility and all those different types of things, it comes down to you're able to develop skills and skill base. You know, and with more skills, you can things when you're racing or when you're surfing, different things become a lot easier to achieve. So it's spending the time doing your mobility and your strengthening exercises. So when you get out on the water, you know, the skill base is there, or can be developed a lot more quickly. So I'll just paddle off into the sunset here at Temple Bay, Noosa, and we'll see you guys next week. Right on. See ya.